let's take a little bit. My guest, I got two guests. I got one and a half guests. Guest on my left here, immediate left, is Brian Elgood, who's with Seabank Capital. And guest number two was our prior guest, who sitting over in the corner. First time we've ever had a person with a mic on in that. Look at him; he looks like a Cheshire cat. Swallowed the canary there, our Santa Claus. And Richard Moore is the fellow that is getting scientific research credits. And you, Brian, let me just we'll start over again here. Brian Elgood from Seabank Capital and Richard Moore. And what's the name of your company again, Richard? It's
Technology Incentives.
TechnologyIncentives.ca.
No, it's Tech Incentives. TECH.
Oh, TechIncentives.ca. TechIncentives.ca. TECHINCE. Okay, TechIncentives.ca. And I was interested because when I typed your name into Google, I came up with a really wonderful prior interview that you'd done on the whole subject. So I took a little glance at it. I felt like I was your brother. But it didn't ask anything about your sex life in there, so we didn't bother with that. You have Seabank Capital, and Seabank Capital is famous, as far as I'm concerned, as being one of the first companies to really direct their attention of dealing with cross-border investments.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do this? Because we've still got Richard here, and I guess this isn't going to be a scientific research, or there's no credit in developing this thing, but somehow or other to do this, you have to develop a system. You have to invent a system. You have, because nobody else is doing this that I know of. The Salvation Army, Sid Williams, is always talking about how nobody understands how to do it. And
well, we do have, as you know.
When you were with the VSO, what would happen? Give me an example.
Well, I was at the VSO prior to when the transaction became
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
So
before that, it was 50% for 5 or 6 years.
Right, right. So we would get the shares and send them to a broker, sell them, issue contribution receipt. But today, same thing can happen tax-free. No capital gains tax.
Well, see, people can give the VSO or Salvation Army or Wildlife Fund. They can. You can have a $500,000 farm. You have $1 million farm, and give them the $1 million farm. Keep on living on your farm, and it's tax-free. So if you have other money as well, the charitable donation of the $1 million can be carried back. How many years? It's at least 2. You have to carry it back the year prior to death and the year of death, and depending on your income level, this can be really significant tax savings, almost as much as a scientific research credit. So what kind of person is going to do this?
We've got one here.
No, but they don't walk around with Santa Claus hats on. Who do you think? Who would be the kind of person who would give money to the VSO for do this with the VSO, for instance?
For the VSO, it would be anyone who wants to keep the symphony
because they nearly closed
alive.
down. They nearly closed down a couple of years ago.
A handful of them have in Canada. Yeah.
I know. I got to go to last May. I got to go to the gala for the Victoria Symphony Orchestra. Joyce Hubert Hod is the president of the Volunteers Association, so I got to sit at the president's table, and the conductor, I can't remember his name, came over and sat with us. That's a way to see a symphony orchestra, because they played all the way through this, but it was tables and people were walking around. You didn't have to be quiet. You could cough as much as you wanted and have a drink at the same time. And I recommend galas for anybody who wants to donate some money to the symphony and have a good time at the same time and not get tied up in a theater being quiet.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay, so what are you going to do at Seabank then? How is Seabank going to handle this?
Well, at Seabank, again, what we're trying to do is help charities as one of our types of clients, both American and Canadian, and manage their foundations. But on top of that, what we'd like to do is make it easy for...
Well, now I get what you're saying. They're saying so
because that's our core business. But we can still assist on the side. any of their fans that want to contribute shares instead of cash, we can help them with our brokers.
So if you had a
Make that
sinking
happen.
fund or a legacy fund or something for a charity or a trust or some such thing that you're looking after anyway, and one of your clients wants to make a donation to that charity, you would just arrange for the shares to go over instead.
Right.
Now, Sid Williams makes a big point about and I'm talking to Sid from the Salvation Army, because there's obviously one of the biggest charities in the world, if not the biggest. I'm not sure. Maybe the Red Cross is bigger. I don't know. But the Salvation Army, or as when I was 4 years old, used to call it the Farshination Army, according to my mother. If the Salvation Army, they are actually working at getting hold of lawyers and explaining it to them, because lawyers are always having an estate come into their practice, because George died, Harold died, Sally died, and in the will it says give the Salvation Army $5,000 or give the Red Cross or the Union Gospel Mission or whatever it says to do it. And Sid spends a lot of time calling on estate lawyers, or lawyers in general, explaining to them that when they've got an estate and there's one of these things, that the estate should give the shares of that value rather than sell them, because all the lawyers, and he tells me that there's just hardly a lawyer that understands that. So it's an education thing that you could start doing with C-Bank as well. We should maybe do a series of, maybe even do a couple of seminars or something on it, and invite a bunch of estate lawyers in so that they know and they can explain it to their clients.
Yep.
That makes sense?
Yep.
You can add, you can ask a question, Richard. You can do whatever you want, because you've done it.
I would think that it would be an excellent forum for all of the tax shelter companies to attend. A money-making proposition for you, David, frankly. You've got the name to be able to attract people to a venue and have the Middlefields and other, or the Quests and other flow-through share companies have a booth in a place where people like Brian come to explain, look, if you're going to make a donation to a charity, you're stupid if you just give cash. Yep. Instead, you should be investing through in one of these tax flow-through shares and get the mining tax credit and the federal tax credit and the donation credit, and your income tax is reduced. You might even make money out of it.
So you've done some good, and you've done some good.
Well, if you're giving away cash, that's cash that you could have spent on a vocation.
Sure.
So instead, invest in a tax flow-through share deal and maybe end up actually making money instead of giving it away.
No, it's something that we could certainly consider.
And have the charity that you're interested in benefit to the same extent.
But I think that you and I have a little similar in this, because I haven't accepted money in my own pocket for speaking or something or other for at least a dozen years. I know we gave about $37,000 to Crime Stoppers and one bunch of seminars, and I always like having a charity that when I do something, because I feel like I'm sort of taking advantage of my position. So I usually donate whatever I do, that kind of thing, just like you just donated the money to the Nature Trust.
Well, it's smart because you don't have to take it into income and pay tax on it first.
Why, can I ask a question of you? Why did you give this money to the Nature Trust? What convinced you to do that? Was this something you've done another year as well, or was it something that came up this year?
It came up this year because I am aware of the limited amount of environmentally sensitive land that exists and how fast it's being eroded, and I want to preserve some part of the planet for the future generations. At the rate we're consuming land as a population, there's going to be very little left on the land on the world that isn't turned into a shopping center or a hotel or a condominium complex. So I wanted to do something to leave a legacy for future generations.
And how did you pick the Nature Trust as opposed to, say, Ducks Unlimited, which is doing the same thing, grabbing all sorts of land and farmers'
I
land?
could easily have chosen the Ducks Unlimited to do precisely the same thing, or the Land Conservancy organization throughout Canada does the same thing. So there are multiple organizations who have a similar objective of setting aside land so that it will never be developed, David.
Well, it needs to be done everywhere, and one of the things that needs to be done, we're talking